All right.
Yeah, sorry I was late today, you guys. I left in time to make it back on time, but I got stuck in traffic behind this fucking like lib caravan. So like I went and jammed at a buddy's house and played music for like 2 or 3 hours, and we are like taking our instruments out to put it in the car. And as we're walking out, like finally having forgotten about the troubles of the world from playing music for a while, we just get this angry crowd of libs honking in their fucking cars, like on some impeach Trump, blah 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 type shit. Like, so anyways, it's just massive caravan, and we were stuck behind them in traffic, and it was miserable. So anyways, my bad.
I love that like protests in the form of just long lines of cars and people just honking. It feels like the final form of like American protesting.
Yeah.
That's how the revolution is.
Yeah, this is what it was always building towards. This is a Super Saiyan 4.
Well, that's how you know they're serious, man, and they're a force to be reckoned with. They're hiding in their cars from COVID.
Right. Got the big gulp.
Well, when we get to the full neo-feudal future, we'll have these like huge coliseums, and it'll be like twisted metal, and everyone will be able to like dress up in their own political costumes and like have like their battle rigs and go out there, and we'll all just like yell at that, and that's what'll determine elections. Is
there'll be social media streams for entertainment. Like that's going to be our new media now, like death race type shit.
Battle bot, like with the different political tendencies slapped on. Like
Sweet Tooth is the original Joker when you really think about it.
You'll have the Q shaman, and then like all of those sorts of guys. They'll all have like they're like big rig trucks or whatever, and then you'll have like the vegan Antifa people, and like the Ann Prims will have like Flintstone mobiles. It'll be great.
Bikes with like the little toddler thing behind it to pull the kids in.
So I'm at Slavoid T.
All right, this is Shit Spouter 37.
This is Black.com build.
This is the Fed Post.
Bikes with like the little toddler thing behind it to pull the kids in.
I can't believe this impeachment thing is back again.
It's what, January fucking 10th? Like what? Dude's got 10 days. What do you expect to happen, man?
It's a joke, but it's like, I can't believe how serious it is. I can't believe how like it's real. It's really happening. They're serious about this. Like they're what was that AOC tweet? Like impeach and like they're drawing up the papers for what? For 10 days?
Yeah, impeachment 2, electric boogaloo, baby. Let's go.
This time he's really gone. He's going to have to leave after this one, I hear.
And it's not because he's just like, happens to be ending his term. It's because they did something. They put their foot down and impeached him.
Right. They're going to execute him this time. They can't let this go unpunished.
That's actually perfect. Like, I feel like, is this basically just like hype beast politics? Is that basically all it is?
That's all of American culture, basically.
That's definitely what AOC's brand is. She's like, let me just like hype all this shit up that everyone's going to like get really hyped up around, like either hating it or liking it, but never actually pass a single bill in my goddamn career.
So you see this broad saying half of the House could have been murdered or something. She said that in the news. Yeah, she said
it's like only, bro.
In Minecraft. But I don't know.
I mean the reaction, I think it's pretty clear that the reactions are either this is 9/11, this is lib 9/11 more than COVID, and we need to round these people up and put them in Gitmo, or the Patriot Act too, or just like this is just a LARPers in Viking hats, and this doesn't mean anything. I feel like that's the two.
Sometimes people do both. That's the dialectic right there. That's the synthesis. They're like, right. This is like dangerous. These people are like fascists, and they're a serious threat. And they're like, look at these idiots though. Once they got in the White House, they didn't have once they got in the building, they didn't have a plan other than just sit around and take selfies. It's like,
right.
How are you saying those two things at the same time? Like,
I guess I always thought of that as like the Antifa thing is just like, I mean, I know there's LARPs on both sides, obviously, but like, the Antifa thing is just like, the Waluigi shit, like pulling up like that and just like, just a joke, just like a complete joke in some form of like being like revolutionary or like doing something great or whatever, or being at battle or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know, like Logo, do you see it as sort of like the mirror image of that? Like, do you view this whole Capitol thing as like like basically the right version of that. Is that how you see this?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that like these are all like ineffective, like totally instrumentalized, like purely spectacleized, like means to like invoke what the CIA would call the strategy of tensions that they use in like most of their colonial holdings. But this goes back to like the British Empire, you know, just keeping people like divide and conquer strategies, right? Like obviously this most recent thing is like the least threatening thing to power in like any actual sense. It's kind of like it was a controlled like demolition to a certain degree. Like they allowed this to proceed because it wasn't going to cause anything, but it would justify literally anything afterwards.
Totally.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea I've heard is like they knew it was going to come. Well, this is like reminiscent of like the 9/11 thing. Like there's warnings in advance that the deep state knows is going to happen, and they basically allow it to happen. And this is something that actually does make sense, like conceptually to me, is like they allow it and then they use this to justify increased surveillance state and all this shit that they're going to do. And I mean, I guess with like the hearing and like the way they were all like, sanctimonious when they came back and they were like, oh, all these like neocons, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This was terrible. I can't believe I danced with fascism.
They're like, we're not gonna question the certification of the vote result now. Like this is just way too much for me.
Yeah. Do you guys think that there was that level of like planning to it where it's sort of like they know it's going to come, so they don't beef up security and they sort of like they allow this to play out in a way where they know that they can use it basically?
Yeah, sure, I could see that. It's like a classic false flag like operation, but like an act of omission rather than a commission. Like they're just like, what did we not do to let this happen, rather than like, what building can we blow up to cause this?
Mm-hmm. It's also a good way to get rid of the Capitol Police, I believe, are pretty much like a nepotism job in the first place. So this is like now a really quick way to sweep out all those guys and have Biden's guys in pretty fast, because like, you know, that it would be somewhat of a security threat, right, to the incoming administration if you have like all these like who God knows, right, what all these Trump loyalist appointed Capitol Police type guys would do with Biden's administration in there, right? They might like even like leak stuff, right?
It's not an institutional position that like exists regardless of administration.
No, they change them out.
Oh, okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay.
I'm pretty sure about that anyway. I don't know. The one interesting thing I just saw today was Clyburn said that the people who got into his office, but they got into his unmarked office, that doesn't have his name on the door or anything like that. So they must have known like where to go.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, I don't know, man. I mean, like it is there is like those, it's like this, like there's the videos of like, oh, the cops just moved the gate and let them in. And then you have the videos of them like having like the scraps, you know, out front of the steps and everything.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's probably like a little bit of a healthy mix of both, but like ultimately, I don't know if you saw that clip of them like kind of just like walking out of the Capitol building after they're all filing out, and it struck me as just like it basically looks like the exit of like a Disneyland ride.
Yeah.
And they're quite literally just like posing for pictures. I don't know, man. Like,
yeah, that is kind of what it's like, right? And then when you see your face on the wanted poster, like now, like while you're stuck in DC and like no planes will take you, right. It's kind of like when they take your picture in the middle of the ride.
Totally,
except like,
the screen face.
No, exactly that. And like, I don't know if you like if you guys know what I'm talking about here, but like when you're standing in line, like at a Disneyland attraction or something, like you'll see like every single little detail, because they're just these like these canals for just huge currents of humanity to flow through, right? Everything's nailed down, every like sharp edge is filed down and all that, and just like this flow of people go through, and it has that feeling to it. Bog made like the joke of like, where did the pop-up machine gun turrets, why didn't they activate, right? But like, yeah, I mean, I don't buy, if this could just happen anytime, like you can't convince me of that.
Yeah.
Right. This was come on, man. Like, this was allowed to happen. And, of course, like, you could say that the ultimate defense is also that they just, like, didn't know what to do once they were there in the first place. And you would be right. But, like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't have, like, a solid, it does get murky, but I think it's pretty clear that this was allowed to happen.
But what about the false flag thing? Like, do you guys think that there's anything to that, or do you think that's more of like
I think that is the false flag.
Sure, yeah, totally.
I think you just let the retards like measure out and cut enough rope to hang themselves with.
Yeah,
right. It's like a cleanup operation to a certain degree as well, because some of the most like Trump inclined, right, are all there. So they all get cleaned up, right? Yeah. Like they're actively against their own interests in that sense, in that like this is like the clearest like honeypot in the world. But like people like volunteer to show up to these things, and like I know Baked Alaska, like I talked to him years ago, and like I would tell him to like not do these things and like not show up to these things because he was like gonna fuck himself. like every time, like when people were going to Charlottesville and these sorts of things, like I was always telling people not to go because they were never good and they were always bad. But for some fucking reason, people keep going to these things. I don't know what sort of disease is in people's minds where they think that this is like somehow benefiting them.
The Capitol thing is such a honeypot, and like the thing is that like none of them wore, like so many of them just didn't wear a mask at all, which is like fine. I like lib pandemic, sure, I agree with you there, but like come on, man, cover your goddamn identity, dude. Like there's cameras all through this building. Like I don't even get that. Like what?
Right. Yeah. I mean, at this point, I don't rule anything out, right? Like if this is like a coordinated to some degree, and then they're gonna get this. Well, we already see what's happening now on like social media and everything. If they're, and the Patriot Act too, like if there was some type of coordination that like they saw this coming and they just like allowed it to happen in a very controlled way, I wouldn't rule that out at all.
I mean, they definitely saw it coming. Everyone fucking knew it was going to happen. Like, they were talking about it was like a plan. It was like a
Facebook event. Yeah,
there was Facebook. Yeah, there's no way that it's like, oh yeah, the intelligence just like missed this one, guys. Like,
right.
Yeah, like at a certain scale, like you can't make moves this large without it being detectable in some way. And again, like this is the same thing that we talked about with like the BLM protests / riots / whatever the fuck you want to call it, is like if you're calling it a psyop or a honeypot, does that have to mean necessarily that like the vast majority of those people aren't true believers? Does that actually mean that they're like all crisis actors? Like, of course not, right? But does that mean that you just like, you just kind of like direct that flow of humanity like I'm talking about? Like it's, this protest was just like the line up to Splash Mountain. Like it just means you just direct it in a certain way, and you just kind of like, change the riverbed a little.
You capitalize off the blowback too. Like if things don't go if things don't go the way that you would need them to, you can use that to then further like reinforce again like what you want to accomplish. This is like the thing about this sort of neoliberal utilitarian empire that we exist within, is that it's been working on these tactics for a very, very long time, and it is very, very good at it. And it is really not that distinct from what everyone considers they're doing online, like trolling, these sorts of things. Like this is the same sort of ideas that intelligence agencies work with all the time. Like trolling is effectively like what you could call low intensity warfare. These sorts of things like psychological operations as a form of warfare aren't like they're not physical violence necessarily, but they are just getting people very confused about where they are and what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything is designed to get everyone confused as fuck about where they are, who they are, and what they're doing.
That was like the explicit like policy behind like the OSS and the CIA and like so many other things, was to create what they would call like a wilderness of mirrors, so that and then with like so much compartmentalization that like even these institutions don't necessarily have a 100% accurate understanding of their own history. Like they destroy their own documents and they forget forget about it.
Oh yeah.
So it's really difficult. Like that's why it's hard when people talk about like conspiracy theories in the sense where it's like everyone is in the know. Like that's actually a very shitty conspiracy if you need everyone in it to know what their role in the operation is. That is like very, very low level.
Oh
thinking.
yeah, it's like basic mafia shit. Like keep it insulated. You know, people at the lower levels don't know what they're doing. They're just
they don't have to know
on a paper. Yeah, and then you have like plausible deniability and all that. And yeah, I mean, I think there's like we always talk about this like with the BLM thing. Is like, is there real anger? In my opinion, yes. And then is it guided a certain way? For sure. And that's where the psyop thing is like, oh yeah, the psyop is them guiding them with guardrails to go a certain way that's pointless.
Yeah,
as opposed to being this idea that, oh, every single person there on the ground is in on it, and everybody there smashing windows is like, oh, I'm I'm like helping Joe Biden win in the long run. Like obviously, like that's insane, right? And so I mean, there's some middle between that.
It's sort of the way, like like in there, it's like what is their headcanon? Like in their self narrativization, what they're doing isn't necessarily what they're materially affecting, right? Like you can like this is sort of like the story of Don Quixote, right? Like he's attacking these windmills, but he thinks that he's like this gallant knight. That's sort of what like everyone is these like LARPers. They have this conception of what they're doing. Like when these people were charging the Capitol, right? Like they thought Trump's already been in charge. All of these people have been indicted for many years, and that they're not even doing anything illegal.
Right.
They're in this like child mind where they're totally conditioned by this alternative reality game that's been created by very, very interesting actors, I must say. Like this whole QAnon phenomenon has been very interesting to follow.
Totally.
Even Alex Jones rejects it now.
Well, he has for a while. He had to kind of court it because a lot of his followers obviously kind of overlap. And at one point he said he was gonna like unmask who Q was. At one point he said he like knew who he was and that he was in communication with him. Like he was trying to see how he could play it or if he could possibly like take it over. But he has his own distinct like sort of ideology, which doesn't function. It's kind of an earlier form of what like QAnon's more advanced because in the QAnon mythos, they've already won. Like that's like what the big difference is. For Alex Jones, something still needs to happen and to change for them to know that they've won.
Yeah, he's the underdog. You can't have this fantasy like, oh, we've already won. We're actually it's clear cope. I mean,
you can't trust the plan because he's trying to make the plan. Like he's like, no, there's no plan. You gotta follow what I'm doing.
Yeah, the victimized thing. Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, obviously. I mean, yeah, the morning of the Capitol thing, I was like tweeting about how like the Russiagate, the commie LARP, the QAnon LARP, like it's everybody's just in this fantasy world to cope with the fact that they feel powerless, obviously.
I think that's why it's important to look at function rather than intention, like to look at what people's actions functionally are doing, especially like at a macro scale, like all these BLM movements and protests and stuff. Like, yeah, obviously the people, their intentions, like not everyone's intention was to support the DNC, right? And not everyone's intention was to burn down whatever the fuck. Like everyone's there under mixed different intentions that are supporting their own interest. And so I think it's important to be able to take a step back and look at like functionally what purpose are they serving.
And this fantasy that you're going to keep Trump as president is just delusion. Like it's already gone. It's already been the forces that are making sure that he's not president. That's already done. That's already locked in.
You'd be surprised, man. I've been following the Q people since all this happened, and they haven't skipped a fucking beat. Like,
oh no, they're still trusting the fuck out of that plan.
That's what I mean. It's just denial. It's like, I mean, even during the raid, like Trump is like resisting calling he called the National Guard on them. Like he called it on his own people. But this is the thing, right? Like, is like, I know that it's they're there and they're not really threatening any power. But I mean, this is the thing. I think there's an in between where I don't think they expected that amount of people. I really don't. And I think as far as security or whatever, like if you're saying with like the Capitol Police and all that, like there's some tie to administration, like, and he's the one who calls the National Guard, all these people being like, oh, why wasn't the National Guard called like weeks in advance? Like if he's the one making the call, he's not going to make that call, right? Despite all advice of like, oh, you need to do this. This might get serious or whatever. He's not going to do that because that's his people. And that's the only power he has, right? If he's not part of the the machine, and this is pretty much all he has, right? Even as he's leaving, he's already gone. They're the only thing that keeps him from being like, a leper, like completely outcast from society. So of course he's not gonna do that. So I don't think they were prepared for the amount of people that came and the way it came. And I mean, like, this video of like outside, like masses of fucking people coming. Like the day it happened, there was this video of like, they opened the gate and they walked in. A couple guys walked in, and there's other video of like masses of fucking people like slamming through a bunch of cops. Like, that's
but there's like
completely different.
3 or 4 like Capitol security people there versus like 15,000 police with like riot shields or something, which they could have put there.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's what I'm saying is like they weren't prepared for it. And like this video of like them like fighting in the hallways and like slamming the doors against each other and like squeezing a cop in a door. And as far as the whole thing of like they let them in, like there's the video right before the woman got shot where they're saying like they're yelling at these guys. They're like, hey, we fucked up a bunch of your fellow cops outside. Like, we don't want that to happen to you. We were defending you. This one Hispanic guy was like, we defended you when the whole country hated you. And like, you're standing in our way. Like, you need to get the fuck out of the way. And then they move, right? There was like some reluctance to moving. After they move, they start breaking through the glass. And then we all saw the video. She hops up and then she gets gunned down from the inside. So I think that really sums it up in terms of like them being let in. Like, yeah, they are, in a very literal sense. Yeah, they are being let in, but there's a difference, right? There's like, they don't want them in there. They don't want this to happen. I mean, a lot of their power is exuding more power than they have.
I don't think the people on the ground, like those Capitol security guards, wanted them in there at all. Sure, but like
exactly
the overall function of them like not providing enough people there to be like an actual formidable force that could handle a mass of people is that they do want that to happen.
Exactly.
Like, why would they want it to happen though?
It's for
because it was not a threat in any way.
Yeah,
like
nothing bad's
going to happen
for the establishment.
What do they gain out of it? What do they gain out of this
reason, proper cause.
They're
doing anything.
They're vindicated for the last 4 years. Like this.
Yeah, now an actual fascist Nazi mob stormed our state house and occupied it. Oh my God! Blah.
They disrespected the citadel of democracy. The what did they call it? They used a very religious terminology. It was a fun moment.
Well, it's funny because it's funny you say that because because it is like the way I'm looking at it really is just like, yeah, like you come in and you question the big dog's claim to the authority he wields. And so now like the libs are acting as like the antibodies in this system. And that's exactly where you want them, right? Like if you question the legitimacy of the government, like people are going to have this like absolutely dogmatic response to it. And yeah, you do the photo op. It proves everything of the last 4 years correctly. They just stuck the landing. Like the motive is so clearly there, right? I don't think that the psyop is done by being like, all right, so like all the security guards inside, I don't know if it was a cop or security guard or whatever, like they weren't in cops clothing. They had like telescopic batons and like suits on, but maybe that's how they dressed in the Capitol building. But like, I don't know that they like sat them down for a PowerPoint and were like, hey, like, here's the plan for, the fake protest. Like, I think like COH said, you just like, have a thin staff that day. You just under prepare and it kind of just works itself out. And then, yeah, you just have like one guy smoke a lady accidentally. And like, he clearly wasn't on the same page, but yeah.
I mean, all that, like the violence and like the cops getting beat and like that the struggle of all those videos, like, I don't know, that it doesn't look to me like it's like that. It doesn't look to me like that at all. I mean, again,
they don't have to know anything. Like all they had to do was like not have the capacity to actually like defend what they were doing. Like, they were just left to
sure. But this is the thing. Like the FBI, like the feds, right? Like the authority, the police state, right? The different levels of that. A lot of their power is the illusion of power, right? Just by raw numbers, they can't fend off the mob, right? If there's a real mob, right, in the real sense in this country, they don't have the capacity to really hold them off, right? Well,
I don't think I don't think they're worried about such a thing even happening because it's not really feasible. Like the sort of organizational capacity is just not there. So it's actually better so that you can arrest all of these people now, right? Like all of these people are going to go to jail for a long time. Sure.
I'm just saying that that's a very powerful thing, right? Is that the idea that like, if the mob really does come for them, right? In a substantial way, if that ever does happen, they're pretty fucked. I mean, they can put it down, I'm sure, in some way or another with the military or whatever, but like it would be a disaster, right? And they have to exude the illusion that they can handle this very easily, right? So these things that happen like this, which, I mean, I don't care what anybody says, it was completely a shock to most people. This breaks through that illusion. This cracks that illusion of power. And I don't think they want that. I think in the long term,
if you can have a fake crack in your illusion of power, then you can have a good reason to clamp down and like strengthen and consolidate to build your power back up. If your base thinks that you're weak and powerless, and they're going to let you do whatever you want to get back to power,
but that doesn't do anything in the long term. If that resentment is still there, the resentment it only grows.
No, the resentment's going to be there regardless, no matter what, forever and ever, and that's going to keep building, and it's always going to grow because conditions are getting materially worse nonstop, and that's the direction we're heading in. And like they're not going to try. Like there's nothing they can do to combat that at all, except for consolidate and clamp down.
I'll say like what CRK, kind of what you're talking about of like if you need to smack them on the wrist, like if you need to make a gesture, if they're needing to ban all these people off Twitter and all that, and there was this spectacle of people getting into the Capitol building, like that shows perhaps that they're not as strong as they are. But what do you think has more symbolic potency, right? Like the Viking guy yelling at the podium, or like this like post 9/11 terror campaign that the entire media is in lockstep doing. Now, like if you genuinely think that like people getting into the Capitol building and you know showing other people that like this can be done, if you genuinely think that has more power, then you know maybe you do, and that's a disagreement. But like in my mind, there's no competition, right? People are having like a really dramatic reaction.
Who though, right? Yeah, I agree with you. I agree that's the two optics that come out of this, right? But to who though, right? So if you're part of the group that hates these people, right? If you're in that group, which one of those two sticks out more to you? And then it becomes a matter of which side has the numbers.
Well, what you learn is that you can go do these things, but it won't ultimately help you in any way. Even if you could break into the Capitol building, it wouldn't change anything. So like, what's the real lesson? You're saying that it looks like
they're just going to go home and just be like, all right, well, never mind then. You think that just,
well, if they join up in anything else, what they're going to do is they're going to be volunteering once again to serve like some like FBI agent like running one of these like sub organizations to be activated at another time when it might be useful.
No, but I'm just saying, like, are these people just going to just give? Are they going to see this and just black pill and give up, and we're never going to have to see anything like this again? Is that what you guys think?
No, I think we will see something like this again, but I think that the real relevant group of people are the vast majority of people, which are apolitical normies, and apolitical normies are probably going to like see some weird shit going on in this right now. But ultimately, like what fills the vacuum is who has the big megaphone, and the person with the big megaphone is the person like actively disciplining people and telling them that this is a terrorist attack. If somebody like didn't want to dedicate the time out of their week to like get well read on this stuff, they're going to take like the first version available on the shelf of this narrative. First version available of this narrative was that this was like 9/11 too.
I know, but less people believe this shit. Less people buy into those like narratives than they did when 9/11 happened. That's
Sure. But look at what do these people believe instead, right? We can look at like the various types of dissidents, and we've got our whole little incubation chamber on the internet so that we can study all of the different types of dissidents. And like, what has any of their action done to further any of their supposed goals?
Right.
So it's like it's like kind of useful in a way if all of these people then have sort of these delusional aspirations with these like sort of more fringe political ideals. It's beneficial if you like filter everyone into this sort of funny farm of a fake internet politics, because then they're not going to be able to do anything. And they're basically categorizing and sorting themselves to be surveilled and tracked and manipulated.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know. I think you guys are all like, I just disagree with the way you guys are perceiving the bigger trends of all this. I mean,
I'm just saying what's a bigger trend than data analytics? and creating these sorts of communities, these sorts of consumer demographics, and then you can then like put them through network topographies, and you can chart out
of course,
organizational structures.
Yeah, like think about it. Like
this is all presuming that they stay in the margins, right? And this is the thing: as time goes on, this is not going to be a marginal thing. I mean, I think that's the takeaway for me is that this is going to happen. I'm saying that this is all presuming that these people stay in the margins, or this anger stays in the margins. And I'm saying this is going to happen again. These people are going to be more angry. There's going to be more of them. It's inevitable. That's what I'm saying. It's like this.
I think dissident energy.
I think the basis of a lot of what you guys are saying is on the takeaway that this is in the margins, and this will stay a finite amount of people, and it will just go away. And it's not. It's not going to go away.
Well, the thing that keeps it in the margins is the fact that this is like you cannot separate this honestly from one political faction, right? One partisan political faction. Like this was like you can say, and you'd probably be right, that this was like really about the stimulus money and shit like that, right? But like still officially on both sides of the narrative, and they're both illusory, but still officially this was about contesting the election, right? I mean, in the simplest way I could put it, right, is like if every 4 years we have an election to basically let some of the steam out, right, and like have the system legitimize itself, it's like the right now we're in this era where it's the helter skelter mirror universe version of that,
and like more rapidly now.
And so it's
not about Trump though. It's not pretend it's just about Trump.
Well, no, let me just finish my point here really fast, which is just that the election isn't the mechanism to let steam out anymore. It's going and doing protests and causing property damage and shit like that, right? And so you just have like Baskin Robbins 31 flavors of different fucking protest events that people can go to. And yeah, you will continue to have that, but like that's just the new voting.
And the reason why it's changed to that is because you're right, CRK. Sure. The dissident energy has grown, and it's going to continue to keep growing. So they're evolving the system this way to make it that.
I mean, this isn't the first time a system has developed this. I mean, this is what literally the origins of the carnival was. And if you look in, I'm just saying the medieval age, the medieval times never ended. Like the sort of feudalism we exist under is just a complication of the feudalism people have existed under for centuries. So like, yeah, you do need to create these sorts of outlets for people to express themselves, right, out in the public, but it's done in the realm of the carnival. It's done in the realm of like an exception from the rule, because then it can be understood as an exception and not the rule.
Of course. And this is all push and pull. That's how it's been from the beginning. And I'm just saying that there's a breaking point. And I'm just saying that, they'll adapt to this and they'll increase the surveillance state, of course, but there's only so much they can do, right? And that's the nature of it, right?
I don't know how much. I feel like
there's only so much can they do? I agree too. Like, I mean, the flip side of that coin, there's only so much that we can do too. Like everything that we do is mediated through these tech platforms, like one way or another, especially now that COVID's got everyone working from home. Even people's livelihoods is mediated through using, servers and platforms that are run by these people that are like corporations.
But then there's literally no point in us pointing out any issue with this system. Then there's no point in us even talking about this.
Disagree.
Why do we even talk about
I'm just not going to be like completely delusionally optimistic. I realize that's how terrible shit is.
This is why you need to take this is why the G pill is necessary. Okay, I'm gonna give you the G pill.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
No, I'm kind of serious in a way, because what the point of talking about these things is that you have to understand that the problem is very, 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 very deeply entrenched, and the problem is the like Anglo-American empire that we live in, this sort of global liberalism, and there's no solution that is going to come from within it. There's no solution that is going to be created by citizens or subjects of this empire to reform this empire into something that it isn't.
Okay. I
don't really agree.
We'll get into we'll move into this. We'll leave this topic and get into that.
well, actually, I want to ask just a little bit more, which is just like CRK. What do you think? Like, as specific as you can be, like the best possible case scenario is for. I mean, because it just sounds like we've kind of abandoned you on the populism hill a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, that's fine.
I'm not saying I've completely ceded that ground. I'm just saying, like, at least in this topic, right? And so, like, what are your thoughts? I feel you've been fending us off, three different points of view, and so what is
the thing? This is the thing is, well, for one, just just a quick thing is like the left being like, oh, well, we would have done more, and this isn't anything like that. Anything coming from them is a complete joke, because they're not doing shit. They're doing Twitch streams about slurs on Discord. Like, they're not doing shit. So anything from them is a complete joke. But holding them aside, right? Just the comparisons. Like, if we're gonna compare this to BLM or whatever, if you're freaking out about your material conditions, and you're smashing your immediate neighborhood, like I said in the summer, I defended that. I understand that it's pointless, it's futile, but I understand that. But if we're talking about getting warmer or colder to sources of power, this capital raid is like what you guys are saying. This is not the end all be all. This is not the goal. You're not at sources of power. You're warmer though. You're warmer, and I think that can't be brushed over with this. Just it's all the same and it's all flattened out. It's all nothing. Like this is warmer.
It's a good gauge for like where the like class consciousness is kind of at. Like that people are feeling this like high level of despair, and they're at their wits' end, and are at a point where they are willing to do things like this. Like, yeah, I think that personally that's a good like temperature gauge on kind of like where there is some sort of class consciousness forming, if you want to call it that. But among people realizing that like shit's fucked up and it's not the way it should be. And then that's why the like greater establishment and powers that be, like they're able to guide that energy into these movements that we're talking about here, and keep that energy like kind of just ruminating, like almost just like kind of stagnant, because they're able to just kind of like section it all off. Like right now, so after the Capitol raid, now they have an excuse to kick Trump off Twitter and kick his entire right base off of there, and then shut down Parler, right? So essentially what they're doing is
not going away.
No, it's not going to go away. They're going to start their own eventually, and there will be some like Dissent like server for like that kind of thought, sure. But what it is, it's just separating people and dividing and conquering even more and more. It's separating people into more different ideological camps. And even though people like largely are having more and more material interests and stuff in common, they are realizing that like that's like the system is evolving itself to try to damper that down. So yeah, like of course, like there is a strong dissident energy, and I think that like my faith is with the people always, right? I think like people like I don't think people are going to lay down and just take whatever. I definitely don't think that, but like, and I don't think that we should, right? But I don't think that like just thinking that any of these individual acts is like going to be it is good.
I literally was saying that it's not.
I know that it's a gauge, and I don't think that saying that it's a gauge and then realizing that it's a gauge for class consciousness, and that's why the system and establishment at B are using it to be able to damper that and section it into their own wills is. I don't think that's counter to what you're saying at all. I think that's pretty much the same thing that you're seeing, CRK.
Yeah. I think. Sure. I remember back to a previous discussion we had, and we've talked about this topic a few times, but like the out in the open authority versus the Hall of Mirrors authority that we've had around our parts up until these days. I think that like having the boot, I mean, not to, sound like a fucking retard leftoid, but for lack of a better metaphor, like having the boot on your throat be fully visible and you have no illusions about that, in my mind, is superior to having it be this, again, Hall of Mirrors illusion.
Yeah, it's useful.
And so in that way, I do think that this is that is a silver linus,
totally.
Right? That power is needing to exercise itself out in the open. It does become harder and harder to justify this. And I can't tell you that I know for sure whether or not like the symbolic victory for them of having a sequel to 9/11/2, right, outweighs the fact that they're having to do things fairly out in the open.
You guys are making it seem like, they're just going on a theme park and all this and whatever. Like
America is a theme park.
Sure. I'm just saying somebody died, and not every one of those people are complete morons and don't know that they're going to be tracked by the feds now. Some of them went in there knowing the risk of physical harm and the long-term harm of being tracked. Some of them went in there knowing that.
Misguided.
Listen. Let me finish. I'm saying they are aware that is a sign of desperation. And again, this is not the source of power. Capitol Hill is not the source of power, right? We know where it's at, right? It's in Silicon Valley. It's with the top 10, right? So we already know that. But I'm just saying this is warmer. It's a sign of desperation, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to get more desperate, only more desperate. And all the things they do with this Patriot Act 2 or whatever, it's only going to get more desperate. And everybody acting like they saw this coming or this is all routine, it's not routine. This is completely unprecedented. and it's going to get more unprecedented, faster and faster. And there's nothing anything in the media and the lib narrative can do away with that. There's nothing they can do about it
actively, and that's what we're talking about.
I know they're trying, but you guys are giving them credence as if they have more power than they do, and that this is already wrapped up and done with. And again, if it's already wrapped up and done with, then what are we talking about? There's no point in talking about this.
Let's talk about China.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Let's move on to the next thing.
I just think to the extent that things are different, it certainly didn't happen the other day. It's been happening for a while. Anyways, sorry. Yeah, you're not. Yeah. Okay.
We disagree with our takeaways from, but I think this is a good point to transition to what Lo was talking about. Is like, so he's full on saying this is all a dead end. This is all it's over already. So what do you mean in terms of China and Xi and autocracy? Like what's your view on that as far as where there is any white pills, basically?
So basically, like, if we're looking at the real structures that everyone here is suffering under and trying, but like failing ultimately to do anything about. I mean, you're saying like there's all this populist energy that's coming up, but this has been true for over 100 years. Like this, and we're not even in a part where if you're talking about people being like threatened by the people, we're not even close to what it was like in the 19th century when presidents were actually being assassinated and billionaires and these tech the Industrial Revolution barons, these sorts of guys were literally threatened in the streets and like had like bombs sent to them and these sorts of things. We're not even close to that level.
It's ebb and flow is all I'll say, but go on.
Yeah, we're not even close to that level. We're not even close to the level of the things that were happening in the 70s and stuff. So I feel like it appears this way, like we have this simulation effect just because of the oversaturation of the media. Like, again, like when things were actually more things like this were happening that were threatening to power. This was before the invention of like the 24/7 news cycle and like social media and all these other sorts of things. But like we have this conception now that that like things are really boiling or like, are heating up and something has to give. But it's really it's not the case if you unplugged from online. If you just totally unplugged from paying attention to the news, it's nothing's happened. Nothing's changing. Like people aren't like organizing in their communities or whatever. There's really not this threat to the general maintenance of the American empire.
Are conditions getting worse? Are material conditions getting worse?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Then that's all I need to hear. I mean,
absolutely.
Okay, then yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, they're getting worse, but that doesn't necessarily mean, like, at least in the way that I look at things, that is going to then result in like a sort of revolutionary moment that will act like really, really challenge and change the general functioning of the American empire.
Absolutely.
But things are getting worse, and people are accurately assessing that like things are getting worse. I would say it's like mostly like the real innovation of like a lot of neoliberal policy was that we just started governing our own country the way that we governed our colonial holdings. So like people are kind of understanding this at this point, like that we're all subjects to this empire and like we don't really have power in it, but we have this very, very engaging simulation of power that everyone is like plays in, that they're all LARPing. And it's like, you can hand a kid a controller that's not plugged in, and then that's basically what everyone's playing with. Everyone's like moving their controller around, but it's not plugged into anything. And then they make these sorts of like Kabbalistic, esoteric, spectral conceptions of causality because they moved something and then it like something moved on the screen. And this sort of feedback loop is just like, what leads to these sorts of absolute delusions that people have of like you were saying that like the people who were rushing the Capitol were aware that they're going to be arrested or the risks that they were taking. I don't think that's true. I think
not
most
all
of them.
I said some of them are.
Yeah, possibly some of them, but I think a lot more of them were entirely convinced that they were like untouched. Like, they were so delusional that they really believed that like they were untouchable and there was no way for this to turn.
I'm white. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm white.
Well, they're like a patriot. They're a patriot. They're a nationalist. Yeah.
Right.
And we've already seen like a big crackdown on this sorts of like the militia community and these types of guys, like the conspiracy theorists in the 90s. I mean, that was kind of what a lot of the Bill Clinton era was creating an alternative to this. And now we're just seeing like, what's this? Like, we're going to have like the years of mono party good feeling under the Biden Harris, where, George Bush and Stephen Colbert will make jokes during the Trump trial.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be really popular too. I mean, I think like, why wouldn't it be? like a lot of people are going to like Trump, but it's going to be harder and harder for them to defend it. It's kind of like a huge humiliation ritual to these people who you might say, or someone might say would be the most likely to actually do something or the most threatening to power in a real sense if they weren't like so delusional.
But so what's the G pill? Like I'm trying to see what the G pill is.
On a really long time horizon, right? If we're looking for we want to change the way that the economic distribution of the world's resources is functioning, right? And that means you want to change these institutions or alter them in the total geopolitical realm, like at the highest possible level. And so you look at like who are the geopolitical actors in play, and we have what is fundamentally not too different from how it existed in the 20th century, where you have the European sphere, you have the Anglo-American sphere, and you have like the communist sphere, or which was led by the Soviets and now is more the Chinese, right? Those are the three main powers at play still. And so if we want to alter things, we have to alter that balance of powers. And that balance of power is being altered away from the dominance of American empire. And again, like our enemy here is the American empire, because we're subjects of the American empire, and it doesn't do anything good for us, and it costs us everything. Like our military existence across the globe doesn't do anything for us. Like we all talk about it as if it does, right? Like if they weren't out there defending our freedom, like what would we have, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentally, these people aren't working in the benefits of the citizenry. They're working towards the benefit of the global World Trade Federation. Totally. So if we want to change that to a policy of non-monopolarity and something that, and like not governing according to like a liberal conception of resource distribution, then the only feasible alternative you have is Xi Jinping right now. And he is actively combating liberalism every single day and the American empire every single day. And yeah, that's it, right?
Man, Rin is going to hate this episode if he listens.
Goodbye to Ren. Yo, we appreciated your listens. Sorry, this is the one.
Yeah, for context, we have quite a character on our Discord server who's our resident in-house plan truster.
Okay, yeah, they love Taiwan there. The Taiwanese also love Trump. He might end up there. Who knows? He could be president of Taiwan.
Taiwan number one, right?
That'd be kind of based. So you at this point, you think the game is it's out of our hands what's happening here, and it's just kind of hoping that G or she can.
I'm like a political elitist. Like I don't believe in the population. Like I'm not like a populist. Like I have a concern for the people, so I would say like I'm a populist in that sense. But I don't think that like mass political action or like democratic political action is a useful means.
Yeah, I think we come from opposite.
What about like a vanguardism?
Well, like you want to talk about vanguardism? Well, like what do you have? You've got the CCP.
Right. No. Okay, so you are looking for the CCP to be the vanguard, like the global vanguard, and you kind of think that that's going to be our only hope is to wait for them to slowly be able to take down the American empire and exert their will over global economy.
Well, it also like in a circumstance where America like has to step down on the world stage and kind of like turn inwards. I think that was sort of like part of what was pitched with Trump to a certain degree. Like he was constantly talking about how much like NATO was a waste of money and all these things and like why. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. I think a lot of people want a downsizing of the American empire. And unfortunately, like I think this isn't going to be done voluntarily. Obviously, there's too many people profiting from it for anyone who has a real power to have any interest in doing so. But I think it's like a necessity of history and the future. Like I just don't see the American dominance of the globe extending for another century.
So then what do you think about like Maoist or Leninist parties here in the United States that are attempting to
they're like kind of LARPing
like that and then lean back on Xi to like have as support? Like, do you think that would be an avenue?
I don't really think so. I don't. And like, I also think that like the communists who think that Xi is like a like ardent Marxist, like communist or whatever, I kind of don't understand him either, because he's far more of like, he's like an enlightened despot, you know, like his.
Yeah, he's not a Marxist.
He is to like a certain degree, because like that it's like it's like you could call it right-wing Marxism, where you take sort of the Marxist realpolitik, but you use it at like as being like the vanguard. So it's sort of like the Stalinist conception of how to use like Marxism as opposed to the sort of populist Marxism or the libertarian Marxists, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's what's interesting is like I definitely have like sympathies for the mob or whatever, and you were mentioning before like how you view autocracy as like the solution or whatever. So
yeah,
you're saying that's what ties you to the right. So what do you? So yeah, if you're not so it's not like you view Xi and China as good because we usually hear this from lefties. You get what I mean? Like we hear this from like people who are like they
don't know what they're talking about. They haven't.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're coming from a different angle from this. So your liking of it is strictly the authoritarian aspect. This is interesting for us because like usually
the legalist aspect, you could say, like the kind of formal aspect, like the fact that it's a power that can actually plan things, right?
Gotcha,
like
gotcha.
I mean,
look at accomplish things.
Yeah, look at the COVID response, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like the easiest thing. Like, and like you could say, like, what do we care? Like, what if you were to say, like, which country seems to be demonstrating like a care for its own citizens? You know what I mean? And it's like at the beginning of this, Americans were like totally flabbergasted by the Chinese response to it. They're like, this is like so authoritarian, et cetera. Like, this is such cruelty, but this isn't cruelty at all. Like, this is actually like benevolence.
Yeah, the way they handled it was like miles ahead of the way that we handled it here, for sure. And like only like a centralized, strong source of government power could do that.
Well, we have it. We have that sort of. The other thing is that the way our system works is that when it comes to like cultivating new elites, like they do not get pushed into the positions of statecraft. They go into the private sector,
sure.
Right? So like that's also like a major problem with it, where you can act like there's no prestige. Real prestige in the sense of being able to accomplish things or to build things and going into politics. All of these people go into like Silicon Valley. All of these people go into the private sector. They work at hedge funds, et cetera. Our whole like civic culture for the cultivation of elites is this sort of liberal market ethos and not one that you could call nationalist, right? Or even like autocratic to a degree, where you're trying to be like a minister of the sovereign to like, legislate for the people, and that this sort of recognition is like worth something in the world. But, that's not really how it works for politics in America. It's kind of like a really rough deal where you get all of the scrutiny without any of the power, whereas the people who actually wield power, again, get none of the scrutiny and all of the power.
So are you into like technocracy of like having the like, as long as we just put the right people and the smartest people in these positions of strong power, things will be right? Or are you more so into like the apparatus of having that state that functions in that way?
I don't think there's like a choice but technocracy, just under like the media environment and like the technological conditions we're in. Like the question is, well, I mean, what are you going to do? We're going to like eliminate technology and go back like Ted K suggests or whatever. Like,
I didn't think of technocracy. Oh yeah. Okay.
No, technocracy is more like a meritocracy on an autocratic scale.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the problem with our technocracy is that it's not chosen for competence necessarily so much as it is like utility towards something else. It's not like if you have an organization which is producing like things that are good, like good outcomes, then you want to cultivate like people who are effective in those organizations. And obviously you don't want incompetent people to have power, right? This is like sort of my problem with democracy is like we have this conception that like competent people or power corrupts people is what people say. But I believe the exact opposite. I think that people corrupt power. I don't think there's any reason why power is in itself something to be questioned. I think that the people are the people who should be questioned.
Yeah, I can agree. I can agree with that to an extent. Like, especially like as far as the routes which people take to get to power. Like, like I think that power in extent is good when used for like the right purposes, right? Like, I think that like if things were to go exactly right in my way, and we had like an economic populist like underclass takeover of the economy and government, I would prefer to have a strong governmental body that can then oppress our oppressors and put people in jail, take people off the media, whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. Like Xi Jinping's arresting Jack Ma. He's arresting all these, and like if you look at the connections for a lot of the people he's arresting, it's like a big segment of the Communist Party that was sort of placed into power by the United States in the 90s in order to like open it up to the market as much as possible, which is why there was so much like Sino optimism, because like they were essentially trying to turn it into like the next level of like the neoliberal like technocracy, global world trade organization type thing. This is what they were trying to cultivate China to do. But Xi Jinping is like a sharp turn from that. And it's like really enlightening to a lot of people in power in the West.
Yeah, because they're kind of wanting to do that, but on their own terms.
Yeah, well, what they want is they want to be able to exert power over the Chinese government by opening it up to the market so that they can own a bunch of businesses. And
but I'm saying China kind of wants to do that to the rest of the world on their own terms, though. Like, they don't want to do like a WTO thing, but they want to do like a CTO. Like, they want to have like they want to be able to exert their economic will. Yeah,
but at the same time, they're not trying to. I don't think that they're trying to export their ideology as much as we are, or I don't think they're as interested in governing the entire globe so much as they are in using maximizing their trade relationships and creating these sorts of larger Eurasian infrastructure projects for their own self-interest
and codependency and stuff like that, and establishing connections and markets rather than just
and it's also a way of routing around what is still fundamentally a maritime commercial society, because most goods are still transported on ships, even when it comes to China and these sorts of spheres. But if you look at those, people have been arguing how effective the New Silk Road or the Belt and Road Initiative has been. But if such a network of transportation is really established and it kind of kneecaps the seafaring, the sort of conception of globalism that we have is very much a seaboard conception of the globe. That'll be a massive shift in geopolitical power, and it would probably I don't know.
We talk about that a lot on here. It's kind of a soft imperialism is kind of how we view it. As from China, it's like they go in, they set up infrastructure, they make these deals, which are going to end up defaulting in the long run. And then they can use these ports and use this infrastructure for their financial benefit. And then they also have the infrastructure to use for their trading and for...
they learned from what America did. I mean, a lot of what they do is based off of the Marshall Plan and things that were developed in the 20th century to create the WTO in the first place. They've long studied the way that we've governed, but they're trying to move beyond that in a way that I don't think that we're capable as an empire of really thinking up. People have kind of given up on we only have this sense of a restoration of order of some earlier form of liberalism, but no one really has any sort of visionary conception of how to turn this into something better, except for the global financial class and Silicon Valley. These are the people who are going to be charged with doing the central planning for America,
which is fucking bleak.
But they don't have any we have I just don't believe you can have a world that isn't fundamental, that is egalitarian. I think it's impossible. I think that a kind of hereditary aristocracy has existed for forever and will exist for forever. So the main difference is that our hereditary aristocracy is beholden to nobody, and they have no noblesse oblige. They don't have to care about the people. They don't have to care about anything other than their own self-interest.
So you're basically just riding with the inertia, because sorry about the noise back here, but yeah, I mean, you're just riding. I mean, this is the uninterrupted, unfazed inertia of the way the whole thing is moving, and you're basically saying that you agree with it. Basically, that there's nothing wrong going on. Basically, this is.
I just don't think there's anything out of the ordinary happening.
No, I don't think anybody would say that. This is how it's supposed to. This is what the plan is. If there's a plan to be trusted, this is the plan. But I mean, but you're saying you don't have any qualms with it.
It's not I just don't know what the usefulness of having a position, a moral position on it, or being aggrieved by the fact that there's a sort of perpetual hereditary aristocracy. At a certain point, I feel if you're just opposed to these things, you have to ask what if they just can't be gotten rid of? What if that's actually right. This is just baked into just human nature to a degree, and so it's I don't think that opposing it necessarily does you any favors, as opposed to seeing taking it as a granted and then seeing what you can build off of that.
Yeah, to me, I see that having a state as a granted for at least for the time being for a long time going forward, and it always has been from the past several epochs of history. And it's I see what you say there, but for me, the solution there is we need to try to figure out a way to repurpose the state for our own purposes, rather than just kind of hoping that G ends up having a more benevolent state for the people.
Yeah, but the question is then, right, when it's okay, so how do you do that?
Totally. Yeah. And no one has an answer to that.
Yeah. So that's why it seems to be a dead end.
Yeah, it seems miserable because most people are like, oh, well, like we just kind of like do it and then it happens. And it's like, no, like that's where like a lot of my project, that's where I get so frustrated a lot of times with like a bunch of orthodox Marxists and stuff I talk to that are like, oh, like determinists and that type of thing. It's like, oh, this is just going to happen. There's just like this building resentment. This is how history goes. And it's like, to me, I think history is heading in that direction, but like it could very easily be what you're talking about, which is just like technocracy rather than like it developing into people, taking control of the state apparatus for their own purposes and establishing their own thing. But like, so when you start talking to people, you're like, okay, motherfucker, but how are we going to actually start doing this? Like, what's a tangible step that anyone could take? What would it look like? And like, what would a transitory government look like? And like, no one ever knows what to talk about. But to me, I think that's the utility is to try to work on a project like that, is to try to figure out what are tangible steps that make sense within our material conditions versus just kind of blackpilling on it.
Well, my thing is more like what you need to do is to become trained into making like trade deals and things. Like, you should be
join
like
the elite.
You have to, like, if you want to change things, simply become rich or join the elite, like, I don't think that like there's no other means of developing power aside from accumulating power, like you can't be granted power in the sort of sense of like, you have a lot of ideas and then people give you power. There is a sense in which that can function. If you can gain the recognition of people who do have power, then you can be then like instrumentalized by those people to wield power. But, I just don't see, I don't like, this, you're saying like what, like we need the people to seize the government so that they can represent themselves. And it's like, okay, well, we're like hundreds of years into the people having already done that, like a long, long time ago in like kind of Anglo history where we have like, and what it was that the barons wanted to have rights over their lands. Yeah. And I think all revolutions are ultimately like revolutions of the bourgeois.
Sure. Or at least in recent times. Yeah, no doubt. But so what I think is that like, I don't necessarily think that it's like, oh, we just need to take over the government. We need to be able to set forth some sort of action and plan of action to be able to build power for people who are working class, like be able to find some sort of system to collectively accumulate power so that then we can get into positions of which we have leverage to then be able to try to, like you were saying, find someone that's like a patronage thing that can then get one or two people of that ilk into positions of power. And then from there, like also have people who like, are of the same mind to go into police academy, to go into, kind of send ideology or, that kind of thing into all the different. This is where I sort of disagree with you because what I detect is like a sort of remnant of kind of like evangelical Protestant assumptions, right? Where what you're saying is like we need to get people into the priesthood by spreading the ideology, and then we'll have like the universal priesthood of believers. Well, that's kind of me trying to bridge the gap between what you were thinking and what I was thinking, because I don't think that's necessarily like, I don't think ideology is the way that you win a war, right? I think like putting people who are materially wanting and materially of the underclass, the only class that can really change things for the betterment of the majority of the people, into power is the way to do it. But I think that like first steps towards doing that is to like be able to try and start infiltrating some of these institutions in a way to. I would say what you really want to do, and what communist revolutions actually accomplish, is not that they put working class people into positions of power. They just liquidate the old bourgeois and they create a new aristocracy. So like installing a new like vanguard or whatever. You're basically installing a new set of ruling families.
This is okay. This is okay. I think the thing is like it's weird talking to you about this because like I'm so used to like communists being like, oh, China's really for the people and like all this stuff, and that's why they're good and that's why Xi is good. And so and then the criticism I'll give is like, oh, they're really capitalist, they're really imperialist, they're really authoritarian and all that. But you're and they do censorship, but your stance is really interesting to me because it's basically saying that those are the good things about it. That's what makes it good.
It's just that they have they have someone who has executive authority, who has responsibility for his ruling, and is held accountable to that, and has to wield power. And his interests have become concentric with the interests of his own people. if that makes sense.
Are they really? I mean,
what would you say Xi should do more in the interest of his people?
I mean, the labor laws are shit there.
What reforms? Like, if you're looking at reforms, I mean, these are all things that are discussed like within the Communist Party, right? I'm not saying like they have a better quality of life or something than the average American does right now. But if you look at the trajectory of like development in their country, like they're the most optimistic people because their material conditions are actually improving every single year. That used to be the case in America, right? When we had like a very strong sense of legitimacy because things were getting materially better for people every single year. That hasn't been the case for a while now, which is why people are losing legitimacy in the ruling class because, you know, they're not getting anything out of supporting them anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had a cheap, empty rise after World War II that just gave us a quick boom. So, yeah, I mean, obviously after this, it's only downward, and they have a longer trajectory. So, yeah, I guess it is. I guess it is improving, but not from a good place. I mean, I don't know. I see I see this all as like race to the bottom shit, as like, you know, in terms of like how poorly they treat their labor there, and basically trying to use that to justify how poorly the American labor should be. But I guess this is a bigger question I'm thinking is just like, so you were saying before, like, you know, you gain power you with wealth and all that, and then to build something off of, but what's there to be built off of? Because I mean, I guess from what I'm hearing from what you're saying, like it sounds very much in line with the global trajectory of global capital. And at that point, I'm like, what's the difference between that and Kamala Harris? Why even talk about politics?
There you go.
What is there to be built off of? Like, what?
I'm trying to get to you, man. I'm saying you're not black pilled enough. Like,
no, but I'm saying, what's the point of talking? What's the point of talking about it then? Like, why talk?
The point of talking is so that you can eventually satisfy your own curiosity and be able to answer the questions about the world. But that's about it. Like what else, what do you want it to do? Like, you want to come to a sense of understanding, right? You want to come to a sense where you have like real knowledge of how things work.
Right.
That can be an end in itself. However, like, you know, people do, like, it's not necessarily satisfying, right? Like this is
right. No, I think you have a very good, I think you have a really clear-minded assessment of how this whole thing works. Same with the good old boys. I feel like they have a very clear, like, no bullshit assessment of how the machinations work and how the machine operates. Like, it's that's absolutely true. There's no mystification. But I at that point I'm like, but then what else? Like, why even? I mean, it's already running smooth. The machine's running pretty smooth. Like, there's nothing to. Why even think about it? Like, why not just like log off and grill? Like, that's what I.
Yeah, it's about as effective as, you know. You can also, like, you could have this conversation while grilling. It's not the worst thing in the world to talk about. But that's all you can really do. I mean, what are we ultimately doing? Is we're four guys on this podcasting type app having a conversation about things.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like an eternal thing. You can constantly have these sorts of discussions. You could say that at a certain point, like, such a discussion would ennoble people to be capable of like wielding power in a sense. Like, that's sort of like the Platonic ideal, right, of like the philosopher king, which is why I'm kind of like an absolutist.
Right.
Because that's ultimately what you want, is if you have someone who like actually understands how things work and how power actually functions, and they have like a goal in mind, then they can actually, like, if given power, put that into place.
Because you before you said like to build off of it, like you understand how it operates, and then with that you can build something off of it. But like, what do you think would be worthwhile to build off of it? And I mean,
infrastructure mostly.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Yeah, like I think that like the best form of like communism, or like the thing that you can do that would materially benefit the most people the most, is to create like massive public works projects and like public goods, and to invest in these sorts of things. Yeah, stuff like that, and to just like build things, and to build like, you know, to because like that's what ultimately stimulates like a larger part of the economy, right? Like, most of the things that made the American system what it is were state actions and central planning, and that's how it's always been throughout all of history. Everything's always centrally planned by an elite class. The question is like the problem with democracy is that we believe that this doesn't actually happen, that it's actually like this sort of power power is very mystical, and somehow we all have a piece of it, and we're all contributing to the central planning, even though we're fundamentally not.
Well, my question is that you were saying earlier you don't think that power corrupts people, and also that you think that Xi has his interest in line with the people of China's interest. So I was wondering, so you don't think that people are motivated by their material conditions? Like, you don't think that someone in power is motivated to keep power? Like, how would you see getting someone into power and them just magically being in line with the interests of people who have no power and have no money and have no stature?
So it's like a question of interest, right? So if you you have to look at how the system itself is constructed for your material incentive to understand what your material incentives are at a given time, right? So Xi Jinping, his material incentives are to stay leader of the Communist Party, right?
Sure.
That's what he wants to be. He wants to this is what he's wanted to do since he was out in the rural, with the rural peasantry. He's an interesting case because he's a case of a red aristocracy. Like his father was in Mao's cabinet, but he got kind of purged at one point during the Cultural Revolution. So he was suspect, and he wasn't allowed to acculturate through the normal processes of the CCP. He had to go work out in the rural areas with the farmers and stuff. And he actually accumulated power from the local level leading all the way up to the highest level. So you can't really think of a candidate or a political figure whose rise has been that way. He didn't go through any of the China's own elite institutions, but from its own domestic party apparatus. And so you don't think from the bottom to the top. So what more way could you be to how more could you represent the people than to that would be if you, a random guy, right, ran for the mayor of your small town or something, and then eventually you worked from that all the way up to the leader of the party, and then eventually the single leader of the entire country.
So it's to me, the project is figuring out how to make that something that's possible here. How can we try to build power in order to make it so that's possible that we can change some of our institutions marginally to allow people to at least try to do stuff like that.
Logo's saying that's not possible here.
No,
though.
I'm saying you could do that. There's nothing stopping you from running for local office and doing all of these things.
We got plans to. Fed Post has
Fed Post party, baby. Let's go.
You should. That's literally the only way that you could do anything is if you actually just, got power and, worked within that. There's a certain degree though, where, as we're saying, your material incentives, et cetera, our system, there's kind of false cutoff points. That's not really how you become president. No president has done that. So how you really become president is you have to be a part of the elite in the first place.
Sure. Right. So for me, the project would be raising an awareness to an extent to where trying to get people at small local levels to try to get into some sort of small scheme to then be able to try and change their local campaign finance, et cetera, laws, and then go from there. And
the thing is that people are so uninterested in local politics and they're very bored by it. And in fact, the whole process is extremely boring. And it's designed to be extremely boring. I was involved in local politics when I was much younger. I used to film all of our town's town hall meetings and stuff. So that's where you really sort of see how much power you can wield on a local level without anyone really noticing or caring. You can do a lot.
Trying to go against you at all. I lived in a small town and was privy to that a little bit as well for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, that's just really how it works on the micro level. And it's if you can't do that, then how are you going to do anything else?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. So for me, so what if somehow this is a crazy, never mind. That's a crazy what if question that is not even logical to ask. We'll just move past.
One question that I had, and maybe this is a bit of a segue here, but you were talking about infrastructure projects and things like that. And I saw that you made a post recently that stuck with me, and I wanted to remember to ask you about it. But you talked about environmental politics and obviously the biggest infrastructural project that's being talked about right now is the Green New Deal. I'd be interested to hear, and when I hear, I tend to completely agree, right, about a jobs program and infrastructural projects. And I think, and I think probably all do, to be honest. And I think that the immediate thing that the common normie lib would say to that is, the environmental consequences of that. And so I don't know. I remember you had said something about there is no environment. This is all.
Yeah, I'm like a very anthropocentric, which is like just something you're not allowed to be in American politics now, which is kind of funny, right? Like the notion that like you center human beings and like the livelihood of human beings more so than like the environment or like animal life or something is
which I completely tend to agree with you on, and I tend to think that there is something to that becoming more of a trend as environmental politics just becomes more and more misanthropic.
Well, it's bourgeois. It's like wrongheadedness. Like true environmental politics. Like I think that like real anthropocentrism or whatever you were saying, like putting people first. I think that the way that you do that is like by figuring out a way to live in harmony with nature in a way that's like making nature work for us and us working for nature, like vice versa, and not like putting the environment as this like untouchable thing and like we should sacrifice our lives for it, but at the same time like not putting like people as above natural laws.
Solidarity with the trees.
I gotta say real quick, I hate the animal rights people. I don't know if I've said that on the show yet, but I really hate those people. I've hated them for the longest. Fuck those people, yo. And those you ever seen those signs where they have like a cow and it's just like I'm like you but different. You know what I mean?
Like the one that's like where's the line?
Yeah. Do you ever think about that? Like they're like you're like there's a huge part of like I would call it like post historical politics, which is very much just like trying to get you to understand yourself as being an animal, like that you're just like there's like a lot to that to the degree, right, where it's sort of like, you know, animal rights. It's kind of you know, you could get a little annoyed about it and think about how it's sort of like a parody or it's like sort of mocking you to a degree where like you are the cow in the factory farm. And you know what I mean?
I actually used to work at a butcher shop for a couple years, and I remember like my explanation to some people about like, oh, like why do you fish, or like why are you comfortable with this and this and I had this argument I would basically make of just being like, you know, at the end of the day, like I don't really feel too bad about eating a steak because a cow is fucking stupid, and like my life has a lot more value than a cow because I ponder my own existence. And it's just it was funny because like that seems like an entirely I mean maybe like a little bit attention getting, but like that seems like an entirely uncontroversial thing to say, but people do not respond well to pointing out the fact that my life has more value than a fucking cow's does. I'm sorry.
And the third world has consensus. I think that's a consensus opinion right there.
Not in India, not cows.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right.
Well, there's sort of there's like this is like the kind of dark side of this notion of like the real problem is consumerism, et cetera, this sorts of thing where it's like, oh, we have like this spiritual sickness, but like the material conditions are fine. In fact, if you look at like a lot of the global economic forums and stuff and like these sort of utilitarian metrics of happiness, they go, actually improving the material conditions of working class people doesn't make them happier. Like it doesn't actually make them happier. What would make them happier is if we all like scaled, we didn't like see advertisements for things that we couldn't have or afford, and we just kind of accepted a kind of our quality of life and like, you know, found solace in community and family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, yeah, like that's like a really good way for really rich people who are writing these things in the World Economic Forum. Like they're like, why would buying more things make you happy? I can buy anything I want all the time. And I'm still worried about climate change.
And also like that is the way that like you can even just like that's the only way that you can try to be happy as an underclass person that's being exploited every day and has no fucking money and owns nothing, is like by making peace with your lot in life and not thinking about anything else and like just hanging out with your family and building communal bonds. So it's like to an extent they're right, but it's like not right that that's like the answer. It's right, like that's the cope. Like
yeah, well, this is sort of like, well, I mean, the whole COVID, the whole lib pandemic or whatever you guys want to call it. It's the perfect pretext to like, this is where we see the central planning of America in action, right? Like we actually do have central planning, and it's like, what's the central planning? Well, it's like, you've got Amazon is our central planner. And, like the stock market is booming, right? Like, that like our whole fake economy is like mostly financialized. Like we don't have these like sorts of industries and stuff. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to create like a model to counter the Chinese model one that would be for like the post-consumer, post-industrial, post-historical subject, right? Like that's where this is the end game here. This is like we're trying to we're like Elon Musk is saying we're going to Mars, but like no, this is Mars. Like we live on Mars. This is some weird alien outpost.
Oh yeah, some hyper realism type shit, hyper normalization right here.
Yeah. I guess I have to. I wonder as we're talking about this, like I wonder, like, so what do you think is like the big flaws with like the American system or even like Kamala Harris? Like, so in your mind, like Kamala Harris and Biden, like that's better than Trump because they're doing.
Oh no, I would have much preferred Trump to win because Trump's incompetent and he would have continued to like make the empire decline because he doesn't know how to run the empire and he has no interest in doing so. Whereas Kamala and Joe are perfect stewards of empire and they know exactly what they want to do. And there's going to be a lot of pivot to Asia sort of nonsense. The geopolitical like the goals of the CIA are going to be, followed out. There's not going to be any sort of obstruction to the general maintenance of empire, which has been so frustrating because Trump like had no interest and was unwilling to and constantly stepped on these people's toes. So what we're going to get is instead of like, we had like a brief respite where like America couldn't function the way it wanted to, like the people in power couldn't do what they wanted.
For that? Wouldn't you?
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying I wish that Trump had like Joe Biden ran on being harder on Xi and China and like all these other things than Trump was.
No, he wasn't going to do that.
No, he is going to do that. He's going to be much harder.
He's not going to be much harder. He's not going to be nationalist and trade protectionist, but he's going to be like trying to jockey for like Southeastern Asian countries.
Yeah,
like
making deals with Malaysia and the Philippines and trying to, hold on to our sphere of influence there and in Taiwan and all these other places.
Like people on the right think that Biden is like one of like the China's commie puppets. It's like, no. Biden's probably like Biden and Kamala and like these other American empire builders and defenders of American greatness. Like these people are like China's worst like nightmare, not like Trump. Like Trump is like, yeah, he's going to be way more protectionist and stuff. But like, as far as China goes, like he's letting them run free on the Asian market and like that type of thing for now, like over the past 4 years. Like,
yeah, he had no interest in
a huge trade deal. That's the biggest trade deal that's ever happened. And it contains like 1/3 of the world's working population that just happened like 2 months ago.
Absolutely.
Like the Southeast Asian and China deal. Like that's what happened. And like Trump not doing the TPP and stuff, like that's perfect for them. And now Biden's going to come in. He's going to try to put us into the Comprehensive Progressive Act for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the new TPP, and try to do that shit and try to jockey for global positioning.
Yeah, the difference is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to have an influence on Chinese politics. Whereas, and like their own domestic policies, Trump didn't give a shit what they did amongst themselves.
Yeah, but it's an inherent resignation, right? Like the TPP, like getting into that's inherently basically being like, you guys are going to run everything, and we just want to not be left out.
No, the TPP has nothing to do with China. It's like jockeying for the other nations that are around. China's not included in the TPP.
It's basically a way of.
It doesn't have to do with China. Of course, it has to do with.
No,
China.
it has to do with making sure that China isn't the one setting the terms of trade in the region.
Yeah, it's countering China.
Yeah,
it's like a containment theory kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a
like
containment. Yeah, exactly. Precisely. This is like, they want to keep like our system was designed to combat kind of like, this is the irony of the 20th century in another way, where the fascists were like a liberal international, where all the communists ended up becoming like kind of nationalist autocratic movements. So our goal really was to like all these institutions we created were to make sure that there was no national autocratic state to try to just be like try to argue for its own interests as opposed to being a part of the global trade community and legislating in the benefit of the global trade community.
Yeah, that's like all of geopolitics in the 20th century is just American containment theory, like nonstop from like the 40s on.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, it goes back to the British Empire, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the British Empire did, right? They were like, China, you actually have to buy our opium. Like you actually have to let in like our influence, and that's still our interest. Our interest, like even like that's the kind of funny thing about Steve Bannon is that he sort of agrees with Joe Biden to the degree where they both think that like China needs to be reformed and that they're like, abusing human rights, et cetera. We need to have global liberal interventionism in the region to like make sure that they are more fair to international capitalists like Jack Ma.
Yeah, I honestly don't really know what's going on in China at all. I don't really trust any like American media as far as telling me what China's doing. So like anytime someone asks me on opinions on like what's going on with China, I don't really have much other than like just like anecdotal experience from
They're
time.
really not that interested in propagandizing here, which is the other funny thing where like if you look at like our major geopolitical thinkers or whatever, like every Henry Kissinger book is translated in China and they read all that stuff. But we haven't translated Wang Huning's books, and he's been the intellectual leader of the Communist Party for like almost 30 years at this point, and none of his books have been translated into English. Like I think to a certain degree, like even our elites, like in the intelligence community, et cetera, like they don't really know what's going on there. And that's one of the main things Xi did also, is that he was able to, like, one of the things China hacked from us was a list of all of their assets in China. So our intelligence communities have been totally crippled in their ability to monitor the internal workings of China for like almost 5 years now.
But you're saying that one of the things that they hacked was like the names and like list of every intelligence asset that we had over there?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, they've been like, it's not really something our press wants to like play up or anything, but if you read like these sort of like specialty magazines, you know, like Foreign Affairs or like Foreign Policy, et cetera.
Like global shit.
Yeah, like the things that the global elite are actually reading, like this is what they're talking about, and like this is why they consider China a threat, because they can do that, because they can just kick out all of our CIA agents.
Yeah, that rocks pretty hard.
That's actually kind of based. Yeah,
it's actually super based.
I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm not fully G-pilled here yet, but I mean,
I've been getting really deep into it because I'm just fascinated by it, and like I didn't really know much about Xi Jinping personally, or and I was like, well, I mean, fuck, like during the pandemic, I was like, well, fuck, like, you know, like Neo-China arrives from the future. Nick Land was right about something. So I've been diving into it a lot. But one of the things that I think that people especially don't realize is that when they talk a lot about like the Chinese corruption or like Americans like having corrupt deals in China, they absolutely do. But they're not making deals with Xi Jinping or like his faction, like not at all. Like they're the ones who are like, they're like the liberal. There's like liberals in China. There is like a whole neoliberal wing of China in the Communist Party who like sort of like the Dengists to a degree. Yeah. But what they want to do is they want to like, you know, emulate like Silicon Valley along with its policies.
You really think they're communist? You really think they're like not neoliberal, like Dengists?
Oh, there are real communist. Well, I mean, communism in China is like they've developed in a very interesting fashion, like in their own self-conception and their own like Marxist literature is that they think that they've had a unique path in history. I mean, you could say that this is also like, but this is all just nationalism to me. Like they like this is like Marxism's actually sort of perfectly suited to the Chinese like geopolitical and like political philosophical tradition, because it's very much like formalist and legalist and based on bureaucracies and like how a bureaucracy should function and like these sorts of things.
So overall, do you have any issue with the censorship aspect of China or like the authoritarian?
You cut out there, Sierra.
I mean, you. Oh, sorry. I mean, I guess you prefer the authoritarian aspect of China, but like, do you have any issue with the censorship aspect? Is that, especially with like what's going on right now, like does that trouble you at all?
I mean, I just don't see the difference anymore. Like, what's like, I don't think that like what's the like we have censorship too, you know, like this idea that like that like we have free speech to me is like kind of absurd. Like it's a joke. I mean, and like the Chinese people have free speech to a certain degree too. I mean, they're obviously like, but they at least know like what they're not supposed to say. Like you're just not supposed to advocate against the party, right? Like,
yeah, if they're like a truly communist party or in line with the interests of the people, then like theoretically them combating liberalism, which is what they are doing here, censoring that would be a good thing. Like if we were able to somehow, you know, gain state power and state apparatus into the working class's hands here in America, we would want to censor bourgeois ideology to an extent.
Yeah, like if you gave me a button where I could make it so that like Ben Shapiro and like Charlie Kirk and like all these other sorts of people like would no longer be able to like have a platform, like I would do it in a second. Like I don't think that they contribute anything valuable. Like I think that for this like conception of free speech is like ultimately like creates a lot of like mediocrity. It's like I think that, you know, if you're making shit, like I don't know, I don't really care if you are free to proliferate like garbage.
Yeah,
I've been sort of black-pilled on free speech generally, but because I was sort of a free speech absolutist in my youth, I guess, because like, you know, but I just think that it's kind of like a false framing. Like it doesn't produce quality. Like I'm more interested in like the production of like quality thought and like quality goods. And I just don't think that this sort of informal pseudo free speech that we have really incentivizes like good work to be made.
You think there's more quality if it's a narrow like bottleneck, like chosen like from the elite? Like you think that's more quality?
Well, to a degree, it also makes it so that if you want to get around the censorship, which you can always do in like every one of these societies, you actually have to like be more clever about it, and you have to like do it in a more interesting or like legitimate way. Like if you look at like the some of the greatest periods in like literature, if you look at like the Russian literature or whatever, like they were writing almost with the censor in mind as their ideal reader, because the imperial like before they could publish anything, it had to go through this sort of the imperial censor. So they were, you know, there was kind of like a game of trying to get things past that. Or
the irony of shit posters of the day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't really like, I kind of think that the more like, you know, if you make it harder for people to slip through like that, then, you know, you're also creating the conditions for, you know, more interesting
survival of the fittest.
Yeah. It would be a lot harder.
Kind of what Sierra was saying earlier about, you know, you try to stomp it out and it's going to come back in a different, more thought out, stronger way.
I do think that there is something to be said for like, I think that like free speech is probably like a luxury of good times. And I definitely do think that like there is something to be said for like, look, we don't really have free speech over here. And so you might as well just be honest about the fact. I will absolutely.
Well, I'm not trying to flatten it out. I mean, I dated a girl from China that had ties to CCP, and like they if you send a text message, like you know what I mean, like they're all of it is censored and tracked like on that level, like it's all of it. And I mean, I'm not going to flatten it. I mean, as much as we complain about like the woke schooling here in Silicon Valley and all that here, like it's nothing compared to there. And I don't know how I could bend over backwards and explain that as a good thing. I don't know how I could do that.
I mean, I'm just like tend to think like I don't know. At a certain like I'm just not a libertarian, I guess. Like I don't really like I'm not really that concerned if like people who are like this is again like most of the censorship is for people like internal to or like amongst the elites. So as opposed to like they're not policing as much like random people who are doing like almost nothing, so much as it is like a policy of internal censorship in the like political bureaucracy itself.
Right. I get. You're saying all this is fine for the greater good, like the means, you know.
I think they're kind of inevitable. I think we have the same sort of system. It's just more occult. It's more occulted. Like someone said on Twitter, and I thought this was really interesting. It's kind of a troll post, but to a degree, I'm like, you know, that is interesting. But we talk about like how horrible the social credit system is in China and stuff. But the social credit system, no matter what happens, like it offers you a path to redeem your score, which isn't the case in like the American version.
And like, how does their social credit scoring system work? It doesn't work by like if you call someone like a faggot, then you get stomped.
Yeah, no, it's like if you could like all the things that piss people off in like this sort of culture war sense is like that's not what they're policing. What they're policing is like people being like the CCP is illegitimate and we need to like, you know, like to or like, you know, things like that. Yeah, we need to liberalize. We need to like let in foreign capital, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about China. So like my whole opinion on them is like it's formed basically upon like what I've been fed through watered down American media for my whole life. And then also like from times that I was in China for a small amount of time and some other bordering Southeast Asian nations to China and saw the way that they were kind of really like doing some nasty imperialism shit in Cambodia and some stuff like that. And so that's kind of really shaped my whole thought process on them. So I don't really know exactly like, you know, like
I don't think there's like good like, you know, when it's like that's just like how empires in history generally work. Like life is like not like there's no like perfect justice. And like in my conception, when we talk about politics, it's like what we're doing is we're talking about the Antichrist in like a symbolic sense. Like, so this is something something that like exists as like a sort of necessary evil. I consider government to be always like a sort of necessary evil. And like, it's always like, there's always going to be these sorts of like discrepancies in power relations and like stuff like that. And some of them are rectified in time, but I just, like power is power. And if you're going to be a realist about it, it's like, has what China's done worse than what we did to Cambodia so far?
Yeah, totally. Well,
Yeah,
I think that's just what shaped my like general acting opinion.
I understand.
And I realized I have to combat that and like also the media that I've learned and like try to understand like what the fuck is actually going on there. So I try to kind of keep my mouth shut on that.
Yeah,
subject.
I mean, it's like that's like another of the main problems I think in just American politics and political thought is that it's very focused on America, as if like America is the only country in the globe, and most Americans have like no conception of history, even outside of American history. And all of these sorts of things make it very difficult. Like they're all these sorts of layers that you have to break through in order to like have a more like universal understanding of like the development of the world in time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know,
Do you think
go ahead.
Go ahead, Slav.
No, you go ahead because I'll save my question. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, I think like, do you think there's any opposing interests between, this is a very basic, super basic question. Do you think there's any opposing interest between the elites and the underclass? Do you think of it as more of like a mutual interest, like rising tide lifts all boats thing? Do you think of it along those lines? Like that's what I'm trying to reconcile.
It's kind of contextual. It's kind of contextual. Okay. So like at different times, like what we've seen with like what liberalism allows is like with the creation of like the bourgeois class, where you had like the hereditary aristocracy, which had like a very clearly delimited set of things that they had to observe to maintain the legitimacy of the people, right? Like they had responsibilities. They were endowed with responsibilities over people's lives. But when you have like a commercial aristocracy, they don't have that relationship to their subjects. They're like more abstract administrators. It's sort of like in a company, like if you're working in a company and there's one guy who's like in charge, and he like you when you get fired, like that person has to tell you like themselves. But when you have like a commercial aristocracy, then like these sorts of decisions are being made by people where the people involved become total abstractions. So when you have like with like the development of our like conception, our aristocracy of business, it's not tied at all anymore to any of the common people. It's tied entirely to these metrics and these statistics, where we go like you don't have to help people on an individual level or even know who people are or what they want. You just have to maximize the GDP.
It's almost kind of like you go to your doctor now and you're no longer I guess it's probably been this way for a long time, but you go and you're basically a number on a clipboard of risk factors and a few directions, but there's no actual like, looking at you as this kind of subject. This kind of almost seems like calling back to small business discourse that we were stuck in for a little while there.
Yeah, that's one of the things is like I'm not a huge like hater of the petite bourgeois or something like that. Like I don't understand. Like I think that a lot of like most Americans who are like workers don't want to be workers, and most of them want to like own their own business or like own some sort of
fucking saying.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like there are ways that you could legislate. Like I don't think that's like a horrible form of life, right? Like I know like a lot of small business owners, and like being able to provide like working opportunities for people is always good. I don't necessarily think that if you turned every restaurant into a commune that it would improve the quality of the services or even the quality of like the workers, right? Or like or their conditions necessarily. Like I'm not against like private enterprises, I guess. I think that what you need is a balance between like major like industrial unions for things that are like kind of mass product, like in the terms of like mass production, or like when it comes down to like base materials, like like a steel union, these sorts of things, or like a coal unions, these sorts of things, like the truckers, etc. But when it comes down to like the craftsmen in society, like they don't have the same interests as that. Like I still think that they're like the class system is kind of Lindy in the sense that the different types of occupations that you have are kind of hereditary. Like most people kind of work the same type of job that their parents do or their grandparents did or their great grandparents did. And that these sorts of different interests have like they need to be mediated by something larger than themselves, which is like what the role of like the vanguard party in the Chinese society does, because they've like after the Cultural Revolution, stuff like that, they've kind of more opened up to like having like a lot of Chinese are like they're pushing entrepreneurship in China right now as like the communist thing to do is to start businesses. So but like, you know, the Westerners will say they're not real communists, they're state capitalists, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Right.
And you have a book as well, right?
So I have two books. I've got a novel. I've got a novel called Selfie Suicide, and I have a poetry book called Ampersand. They're both really good. I'd recommend them, obviously, having written them. Selfie Suicide's more of like kind of like a dystopian black comedy about the sort of near future. And the poetry book is more of a scattered collection of various poems with a sort of seasonal structure.
Oh, very cool, man.
All right, cool.
All right, well, thanks for coming on, Logo. That was great,
Absolutely. Man. Anytime, guys. I'm always around.
Yeah, this is great. I'd love to have you on again. This is a great conversation.
For sure. All right. Thanks, man.
Peace, guys.
All right. Peace.
Take care.